A single company in Beijing just wiped out billions in market value in one afternoon. No warning, no leaks, just an announcement. And Wall Street's biggest names, Nvidia, AMD, Broadcom, all started falling fast. Semiconductor stocks just posted their worst week in over a year. So what did this Chinese startup actually build? And why does it have American investors this rattled? The answer might change how you think about the entire AI race. Hello, and welcome back to Currency Matrix. If you're joining us again, thank you for trusting us with your time. It means more than you know, and if this is your first time here, we're glad you found us. Wherever you're watching from today, whether that's the US, Canada, the UK, or anywhere else around the world, please take a moment to subscribe and join our community of viewers who follow the stories shaping global markets. Now, let's get into what's really happening. On July 17th, 2026, something happened in Beijing that shook markets thousands of miles away. A Chinese company called Moonshot AI stepped onto the world stage and unveiled its newest artificial intelligence model. They called it Kimi K3. It did not take long for the effects to reach American stock screens. Moonshot AI is a startup based in Beijing. It is backed by the giant tech company Alibaba, which invested $1 billion into Moonshot back in 2024. At that time, the young company was valued at $2.5 billion. Today, thanks to a new funding round, its value has jumped to roughly $31.5 billion. That is a massive rise in a short amount of time, and it shows just how much confidence investors have placed in this company. Kimi K3 is being called the largest open-weight AI model ever released. It contains 2.8 trillion parameters. In simple terms, parameters are like the building blocks a model uses to understand language and solve problems. More parameters usually mean the model can handle more complex tasks, though size is never the whole story. For comparison, Moonshot's previous model, Kimi K2, had 1 trillion parameters. This new version represents a huge leap forward. The announcement came during China's premier AI summit held in Shanghai. Chinese President Xi Jinping made an appearance at the event, calling for global cooperation on AI development. He said the technology should not be a performance by just one country. His words added extra weight to an already major moment for China's tech industry. Within hours, investors around the world reacted. Shares of Moonshot's Chinese competitors dropped sharply. One rival company, ZDAI, saw its stock fall by as much as 30% in Hong Kong trading, its worst single-day drop since it first listed in January. Another competitor, Minimax Group, dropped by 16%. Even Alibaba, Moonshot's own backer, saw its shares fall by 4%. But the reaction did not stay in Asia. It quickly spread to the United States. Semiconductor stocks, which had been performing strongly for most of the year, suddenly came under pressure. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, which tracks America's biggest chip makers, fell by over 12% in a single week. Analysts called it the index's worst week in more than 15 months. Companies like Nvidia, AMD, and Broadcom all felt the impact. The broader stock market also slipped. The Nasdaq Composite, which is heavy with technology companies, dropped by 1.5%. The S&P 500 fell by about 1% as well. For many investors, the timing felt familiar. It reminded them of an earlier event from 2025. When another Chinese company, DeepSeek, released a model that performed close to top American systems, but at a much lower cost. That event had also triggered a sharp sell-off in tech stocks. So why does one AI model release have this kind of power over global markets? The answer lies in what Kimi K3 represents. It suggests that Chinese companies may be able to build extremely powerful AI systems using fewer resources than their American counterparts. For years, the assumption on Wall Street was that AI leadership required enormous, continuous spending on chips and data centers. Kimi K3 has put a crack in that assumption, at least in the eyes of some traders. It is important to note that not everyone agrees on how serious this moment truly is. Some analysts on Wall Street see this as a temporary shock. Others believe it could signal a real shift in how the global AI race is playing out. What is clear is that Moonshot AI has captured the attention of investors, engineers, and government officials alike, all in the span of just a few days. Now the story moves into the details that really matter. What can Kimi K3 actually do, and how does it stack up against the biggest names in American AI? According to Moonshot AI, Kimi K3 was built to compete directly with the world's most advanced systems. The company says its model performs close to Anthropic's Claude Fable 5, which many consider the strongest publicly available AI system today. Moonshot also claims Kimi K3 outperformed two other major systems, Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.8 and OpenAI's GPT 5.6 Sol, in a range of tests. These are strong claims, and they come directly from the company itself, so they should be treated with some caution until independent groups confirm them fully. That said, outside testing has offered some support. One independent evaluation group known as Arena AI ranked Kimi K3 as the best performing model currently available, placing it ahead of Anthropic's offerings on their particular scoring system. Other reviewers found a more modest result, placing Kimi K3 just behind Fable 5 and GPT 5.6, but still ahead of many other well-known systems. Either way, the model clearly lands near the very top of the field. One area where Kimi K3 has shown particular strength is front-end coding. This is the kind of programming that builds the visual parts of websites and apps, the buttons, layouts, and features that users interact with every day. This matters greatly to enterprise software companies who rely heavily on strong coding tools to build products faster and cheaper. A model that performs well here can save real money for businesses of every size. Technically speaking, Kimi K3 also comes packed with useful features. It carries a 1 million token context window, meaning it can process and remember an extremely large amount of information within a single conversation or task. It also supports both text and images natively, allowing it to handle multiple types of content at once. These are not small details. They reflect a system built to compete on every front, not just raw size. Pricing is another major factor driving attention. Moonshot has priced Kimi K3 aggressively low compared to its American competitors. This follows a pattern that started with DeepSeek back in 2025, when Chinese firms first showed they could offer strong performance without the high costs charged by their US rivals. For companies watching their budgets closely, a cheaper option that performs at a similar level is a very attractive offer. As for access, Moonshot has taken an approach different from many US companies. Kimi K3 is currently available through kimi.com, as well as mobile apps and an API for developers. However, the full model weights, the underlying files that let anyone download and run the model on their own systems, are not yet public. Moonshot has set July the 27th, 2026 as the date for that full release. Once that happens, developers and companies around the world will be able to freely access, study, and build upon the model without needing special licensing. This announcement did not happen in isolation either. It landed just as OpenAI was rolling out broader public access to its own model, GPT 5.6 Sol, after the Trump administration approved wider availability following weeks of restricted government-vetted access. Meanwhile, Anthropic's most advanced model, called Mythos 5, remains limited to a small number of trusted American organizations. These overlapping timelines have added even more attention to the current state of the global AI race. Wall Street analysts are now watching closely for what comes next. Investors are particularly focused on upcoming earnings reports from major US tech companies. Alphabet, the parent company of Google, is set to report its second quarter earnings on the 22nd, and its spending plans for AI infrastructure will be closely examined. Many see this as the next real test of whether US tech giants will continue spending at the same aggressive pace or begin pulling back in response to cheaper competition from China. Every major shock to the stock market leaves behind real consequences. This one is no different. The rise of Kimi K3 has raised serious questions about the future of the American semiconductor industry, the strategy behind billions of dollars in tech spending and the livelihoods of everyday people connected to this sector. Start with the semiconductor industry itself. For years, chipmakers like NVIDIA, AMD, and Broadcom rode a wave of enormous demand. Companies across America were racing to build bigger data centers, buy more advanced chips, and expand their computing power as fast as possible. This demand pushed semiconductor stocks to incredible heights. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index has climbed more than 60% so far this year alone, even after its recent drop. That is still an extraordinary gain by any measure. But Kimi K3 has introduced doubt into that story. If a Chinese company can build a top-performing AI model without needing the same scale of expensive American chips, then the logic behind endless spending starts to look shaky. Some analysts on Wall Street are now asking a hard question. Will American tech giants keep spending massive amounts of money on computing power if cheaper alternatives from China can deliver similar results? This is where perspectives begin to split. One group of analysts believes this moment could slow down chip demand. Their argument is simple. If AI models become cheaper to build and run, tech companies may not need to keep buying computing power at the same explosive pace. This could hurt future earnings for chip makers, even if this year's numbers still look strong. A second group of analysts sees things very differently. They point to something called the Jevons paradox. This idea says that when something becomes cheaper and more efficient, people often end up using more of it, not less. Under this view, cheaper AI models could actually cause a surge in AI usage across every industry, from healthcare to finance to education. That surge, they argue, would eventually require even more computing power, not less. So instead of slowing the chip industry down, it could end up expanding it in the long run. Neither side has definitive proof yet. Much of the answer will depend on decisions made by major American tech companies in the coming weeks. That is why investors are watching closely for the second quarter earnings from companies like Alphabet, Google's parent company. Their spending plans on AI infrastructure will offer real clues about which direction the industry is heading. Beyond the stock market, there are broader implications worth considering. If Chinese AI companies continue closing the performance gap with American firms, and doing so at lower prices, businesses around the world may increasingly turn to these cheaper options. This could affect how much money flows into American AI companies over time, and it could shift where global technology talent and investment choose to go. There's also a political angle to this story. The release of Kimi K3 comes at a time when the US government has been managing its own approach to AI access and export policy. Just recently, restrictions were lifted on some advanced American models, allowing broader public access after weeks of limited availability. At the same time, some of the most powerful American systems remain restricted to a small group of trusted organizations. This creates an interesting contrast. While parts of the US industry are still carefully managing who gets access to their most advanced tools, Moonshot has chosen a much more open approach, planning to release Kimi K3's full weights publicly by the end of July. For everyday people, these developments may feel distant at first glance, but they are not disconnected from daily life. Retirement accounts, pension funds, and personal investments are often tied to the performance of these very same tech and semiconductor stocks. When these stocks swing sharply, as they did this past week, the effects can ripple into the financial security of millions of ordinary people, not just Wall Street traders. What remains clear is that this story is far from finished. The coming weeks, especially the upcoming earnings reports and the full release of Kimi K3 on July 27th, will offer important clues about where this competition is truly headed. This story is still being written, and the next few weeks may bring some of the most important developments yet. Before looking ahead, it's worth pausing on a few questions worth thinking about. Does it matter to you where your everyday technology tools are built? Would you choose a cheaper AI service if it meant it came from a different country than expected? These are not simple questions, and there is no single right answer, but they are worth sitting with because the decisions made by companies and governments in the coming months will shape the tools people use every day, often without them even realizing it. Looking ahead, there are a few key dates worth marking down. The most immediate one is July 27th, 2026. That is the date Moonshot AI has promised to release the full weights of Kimi K3 to the public. Once that happens, developers, researchers, and companies anywhere in the world will be able to download the model and run it on their own systems without needing special permission or paying licensing fees. This kind of open access is different from how many American companies handle their most advanced systems, and it will be worth watching how the industry responds once that access becomes real. Another date to watch is July 22nd, when Alphabet, the parent company of Google, releases its second quarter earnings. Investors will be looking closely at how much the company plans to spend on AI infrastructure going forward. Other major tech companies are expected to release their own earnings around the same time. Together, these reports will offer some of the clearest signals yet about whether American tech giants plan to keep spending at the same pace, or whether they will begin adjusting their strategy in response to cheaper competition from China. It's also worth remembering that this is not the first time a moment like this has happened, and it likely won't be the last. Just last year, a similar shock came from another Chinese company, DeepSeek, when it released a model that performed strongly at a much lower cost. That event reshaped conversations across the industry for months afterward. Whether Kimi K3 has a similar lasting effect or fades from headlines more quickly is something only time will reveal. For anyone who wants to follow this story closely, there are a few simple steps worth taking. Keep an eye on major earnings reports from large US tech companies, since their spending decisions often move markets in a big way. Watch how semiconductor stocks respond in the days following July 27th, when Kimi K3 becomes fully available. And pay attention to statements from industry leaders and policymakers, since their reactions often shape public perception just as much as the technology itself. It's also worth remembering that markets often react quickly to news, sometimes more quickly than the full picture is actually understood. A sharp drop in stock prices does not always mean a company or an entire industry is in serious trouble. Sometimes it reflects uncertainty more than anything else. Staying informed rather than reacting to headlines alone is often the wisest approach during moments like this. This story, in many ways, reflects something larger than just one company or one stock market swing. It reflects a global race that is still very much undecided, one where innovation, cost, and access are all competing for the same prize. Whether that race pushes technology forward faster or exposes real cracks in current strategies is a question that will likely take months, if not years, to fully answer. Thank you for following this story from start to finish. If this breakdown helped make sense of a complicated and fast-moving topic, consider subscribing to Currency Matrix so you don't miss the next chapter of this unfolding story. This is far from over, and Currency Matrix will be here to help make sense of it, one story at a time.